After being reborn, I refused to return to my billionaire birth parents. Instead, I remained the cherished daughter of the parents who chose me first. After I was reborn, I made one decision before I ever saw my biological family again. I would not return to them. I would remain the cherished daughter of the parents who had rescued, raised, and loved me when I had nothing to offer. Years later, when my billionaire birth family finally appeared at our front door, I nearly laughed. They had spent their lives protecting their precious fake daughter, and I had spent mine protecting the family that had truly chosen me. Then, when my biological mother and my adoptive mother were taken hostage at the same time, I did not hesitate. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I said, "but I have to save my real mother first." In my previous life, I had died because of the fake daughter and the blood relatives who always chose her over me. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the happiest moment of my childhood, before I had ever learned the truth about where I came from. My adoptive mother stood in front of me with one hand resting tenderly over her stomach. "Evelyn," she asked, "would you like mommy to have a baby brother or sister for you?" Those were the exact words she had spoken in my previous life. The moment I heard them, tears spilled down my face. Mom immediately pulled me into her arms. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Don't you want a little brother or sister?" I shook my head so quickly that my hair fell across my face. "No, I do. I really do." Dad came over and crouched beside us. "Then what happened? Are you upset because I didn't buy you that ice cream?" I seized the excuse and nodded. As a child, I had loved ice cream, but too much of it always made me sick. My parents limited my portions and constantly teased me about my sweet tooth, so neither of them questioned my reaction. Dad tapped my nose. "Ice cream is too cold for you. If you eat too much, your stomach will hurt. We can split half a container later." Mom smiled and added, "Stay home and watch your cartoons. Your father and I need to run an errand, but we'll bring some back." I knew exactly where they were going. Mom had a prenatal appointment that afternoon. In my previous life, I had stayed home and waited for them. They had never returned. A car accident had taken both of them from me that day. After their deaths, relatives told me the truth. I was not their biological child. Mom and Dad had found me as an infant inside a trash bin during a winter storm, wrapped in a filthy towel and nearly frozen to death. They had rushed me to an emergency clinic and later fought to foster and adopt me when none of my biological relatives could be located. Once they were gone, no one in the extended family wanted responsibility for me, so I entered foster care. 12 years later, the wealthy Whitmore family discovered that I was their missing biological daughter and brought me into their home. By then, however, they already had Sabrina Whitmore, the girl they had raised in my place. Sabrina had appeared during the same snowstorm in which I had nearly died. She had been taken in, cherished, educated, and introduced to the world as the Whitmore's only daughter. When I returned, my biological parents and brothers acted as though my existence threatened her happiness. They protected her from every uncomfortable emotion while expecting me to accept neglect, suspicion, and humiliation simply because we shared blood. Remembering all of that, I threw my arms around Mom's waist. "Please don't go today, go tomorrow. I want us to do puzzles together." I had always been an obedient child, so my sudden stubbornness startled both of them. I cried, clung to them, and refused to let go. Mom and Dad assumed I was afraid the new baby would replace me. They exchanged a worried look and decided the appointment could wait until the next day. That one delay changed everything. The accident still happened along the route they would have taken, but my parents were not in the car. They stayed home with me, and this time they lived. Months later, I would never a blotter. They had spent my first life insisting Sabrina was sweet, fragile, and innocent. They could keep believing that. I already had a family. At that age, I did not yet know the details of my origins. I simply grew up as an ordinary, healthy, deeply loved child. Mom taught literature at a high school, and Dad lectured in history at a college. In a household run by two academics, poor grades were treated like a family emergency. They encouraged me without comparing me to anyone, and whenever I struggled, they helped instead of making me feel ashamed. The difference was painful when I remembered my previous life. Sabrina had always performed well in school, while I had arrived at the Whitmore mansion after years of inconsistent education and foster placements. The family constantly compared us. I pushed myself until I earned exceptional grades because I believed achievement might finally earn their recognition. It never did. Every success was dismissed as luck, while every mistake became proof that I could never equal Sabrina. Cole Whitmore, the younger of my two biological brothers, had mocked me openly. "Why are you even trying?" he once asked after seeing my test scores. "You're still just a street kid. You'll never compare to my sister." He said that despite barely passing his own classes. Sabrina was not merely his sister in his mind. She was a weapon he could use against me whenever he wanted to make me feel unwanted. Before the college entrance examinations, Sabrina arranged for men to intercept me on my way to the testing center. I escaped, but I missed the first examination. When I told the Whitmores she was involved, they accused me of trying to sabotage her concentration. "Stop framing Sabrina," they said. "You know how much pressure she is under." The police later arrested one of the men, but he claimed he had acted alone. I knew Sabrina had arranged it because she later admitted it privately, unable to resist boasting when she believed no one would ever trust me. The Whitmores had 2 sons. Adrian, the eldest, was everything a powerful family wanted in an heir: intelligent, disciplined, polished, and publicly generous. Although the family pampered Sabrina, Adrian remained the unquestioned successor to Whitmore Industries. He treated people with calm courtesy and rarely raised his voice. He spoiled Sabrina, but he was also superficially pleasant to me. In my first life, I could never decide whether he cared or simply preferred never to look cruel. Cole was easier to understand. He was volatile, violent, and completely devoted to Sabrina. Whenever she cried about something I had supposedly done, he gathered his friends and punished me. They locked me in school restrooms, hid dead mice in my locker, threw my bag into fountains, and surrounded me in hallways where teachers could conveniently claim they had seen nothing. Then Sabrina would arrive and graciously tell them to stop, allowing everyone to praise her kindness after she had created the problem. I reported Cole repeatedly. The Whitmore parents promised to investigate until Cole claimed I had hurt Sabrina first. Then the conversation changed. Suddenly, I was the aggressor. Sabrina was the victim, and Cole was only an overprotective brother. No evidence was ever enough when the truth made their favorite daughter uncomfortable. In my second life, I had Milo. We fought the way real siblings fought. I stole his snacks, he hid my books, and we insulted each other with the absolute confidence that neither of us would ever truly cause harm. I might smack his arm when he became unbearable, but I would never injure him. He played tricks on me, but he understood boundaries. Our relationship was noisy, ridiculous, and secure. Because I retained the memories and judgment of my previous life, I matured unusually quickly. I began reading about economics, markets, and property while other children were still collecting toys. I persuaded Mom and Dad to make several small investments. At first, they treated my suggestions as entertaining childhood theories. After ignoring 2 opportunities that later became profitable, they began cautiously testing my ideas. The returns were real, and the money eventually became the foundation of my own business interests. My bedroom filled with economics textbook, company reports, and property records. Mom often joked that 2 teachers had somehow produced a merchant. Dad insisted I had inherited my talent from one of the ancient trade empires he taught about. Neither of them understood that I had learned many of those lessons while surviving inside the Whitmore family. Reluctantly, I had to admit that my previous life with them had taught me valuable business skills. After college, Sabrina pursued the arts and entered the entertainment industry. She was too busy chasing attention to interfere with the company, so I used every opportunity available to learn. I shadowed Mr. Whitmore and Adrian, studied negotiations, built professional relationships, and quietly accumulated resources of my own. Once I accepted that the Whitmores would never love me fairly, I stopped begging for affection and began extracting whatever practical knowledge I could. My plan had been simple. If the Whitmores refused to value me, I would become successful without them. Yet even after I stopped competing for their love, they continued to target me. The final kidnapping of my previous life involved both Sabrina and me. When the family was forced to choose, everyone rushed to rescue her. I was abandoned near a cliff and fell to my death. After my rebirth, I examined that memory differently. Sabrina was malicious, but she was impulsive. Her usual methods involved tears, rumors, manipulated messages, and family pressure. Cole was capable of violence, but he lacked patience and discipline. The kidnapping had been too organized for either of them. The route had been chosen carefully. The men knew exactly where Sabrina and I would be. Help had reached her first while I was positioned where a fall could be dismissed as part of the chaos. Sabrina liked attention. Cole liked breaking things. Neither of them knew how to arrange clean financial trails, controlled timing, or plausible deniability. Someone else had funded the operation. Someone else had ensured that my death would make the Whitmores appear tragic rather than guilty. The more I reconsidered the details, the colder I felt. One night, I sat at my desk while Milo slept on the rug beside me, still clutching the toy dinosaur he had refused to put away. A name formed in my mind. Adrian Whitmore. In my previous life, Adrian had always been polite enough to avoid blame. When Cole planted dead mice in my locker, Adrian arranged for someone to clean it. When Sabrina claimed I had upset her, he advised me to be patient. After I missed the examination because of the abduction, he looked at me with practiced sympathy and said, "The world is unfair, Evelyn. You need proof before you make accusations." Proof. He had spoken that word with such confidence because he knew I had none. Milo rolled over in his sleep and kicked my ankle. "Evelyn," he mumbled, "if you're doing evil homework, wake me up when there are snacks." I looked down at him and felt my resolve harden. In my previous life, this ridiculous little boy had never been born. He existed because I had kept Mom and Dad home on the day of the accident. That alone was enough reason to destroy anyone who threatened our family. I opened a new folder on my computer and titled it Adrian Whitmore. Then I began collecting everything I could legally access. Old articles about the snowstorm when Sabrina appeared, Missing child notices, trust documents, succession announcements, her entertainment interviews, Cole's buried school scandals, Adrian's charitable foundations, and shell companies connected to Whitmore Industries. At first, none of it seemed directly related. That only made me more determined. Adrian did not leave obvious stains. He made sure the knife was clean before anyone noticed the wound. By the time the Whitmores finally appeared at our door, I had organized 3 folders of records and found an attorney who understood that I wanted every interaction documented. She did not ask why someone my age was preparing for a family reunion like a corporate war. She simply helped me protect myself. It was late spring when they arrived. Mom was in the kitchen arguing with Milo about ice cream. "That is your second bowl," she told him. He pressed a hand dramatically against his chest. "It's medicinal. You failed one math quiz." "Exactly. The wound is deep." Dad sat at the dining table grading essays, his glasses low on his nose, and a red pen in his hand. I was stealing a spoonful from Milo's bowl when the doorbell rang. Milo pointed at me immediately. "She did it." I stared at him. "Did what?" He shrugged. "Whatever this is. Statistically, it's probably you." I flicked his forehead, and Mom laughed as she walked toward the door. The moment I saw the black cars outside, I put down the spoon. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore stood on the porch with 2 assistants behind them. Their coats were expensive, their expressions carefully controlled, and their eyes already moist. Sabrina stood behind them, pale and delicate, as if someone had painted innocence over the blade of a knife. Cole was beside her, glaring before anyone had even spoken. Adrian stood at the back, perfectly composed, a faint and courteous smile on his face. In my previous life, seeing them had filled me with desperate hope. This time, my stomach did not twist. Everything inside me became still. Mrs. Whitmore stared at me. Her lips trembled. "Evelyn." Mom looked between us in confusion. Dad rose from his chair. Milo walked into the hallway carrying his ice cream bowl, apparently unwilling to miss a family crisis or abandon dessert. The silence stretched until Mr. Whitmore stepped forward. "We are the Whitmore family. We believe Evelyn may be our biological daughter." Mom's hand tightened around the edge of the door. Dad's expression changed, but he did not move away from me, not even half a step. I walked to Mom's side. Mrs. Whitmore reached toward me. "My child, we have searched for you for so long." I looked at her outstretched hand and then at her face. "You found me when you needed something. My parents found me when I had nothing." Her fingers froze. Milo whispered loudly. "The entrance fee for emotional damage starts at $50. Dad turned his head slowly. Milo looked down at his bowl. "Fine, 20. Cole's face twisted. "Is this supposed to be funny? We drove all the way here to see her, and this brat? Milo is my brother," I said. Cole gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "I'm your brother." I smiled. "No." The word was quiet and clean. Cole's ears turned red. Sabrina hurried forward with tears already forming. "Please don't fight. Evelyn must be overwhelmed. I know my existence makes everything harder for her." There she was, the same Sabrina who could transform her own breathing into someone else's crime as long as enough people were watching. Mrs. Whitmore immediately placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No one is blaming you, sweetheart." I almost laughed. They had arrived to reclaim their biological daughter, yet the first person they comforted was Sabrina. Some patterns did not require 2 lifetimes to recognize. Adrian finally spoke. "Perhaps we should sit down. This is emotional for everyone." His tone was gentle and reasonable, as though he had come to heal a wound instead of measure how much control he still had. I looked directly at him. "Is it emotional for you, Adrian?" His smile did not shift. "Of course, we have found our sister." "No," I said. "You found a legal complication." The air changed. Mr. Whitmore frowned. "Evelyn, there is no reason for hostility." Dad stepped forward. "She does not owe gentleness to strangers who arrived uninvited at our home." Mrs. Whitmore flinched at the word strangers. I let her. They requested a private conversation, but I refused to exclude my parents. They asked for a DNA test, and I agreed only if all communication and testing went through my attorney. They wanted to introduce me publicly as their long-lost daughter before the results were even finalized. I declined. Sabrina cried quietly through most of the conversation. Cole stared at me like he wanted to break something. Adrian watched without interrupting. That was how I knew I had unsettled him. He had expected tears, anger, and confusion. He had not expected distance, preparation, or legal representation. When the DNA test confirmed that I was the Whitmore's biological daughter, Mrs. Whitmore held a press conference. She cried in front of reporters and described me as the family's lost miracle, the child returned by fate. I watched the broadcast at home with Milo, whose feet remained on the table until Mom struck his ankle with a folded napkin. Sabrina stood beside Mrs. Whitmore during the interview, wiping away perfect tears. "I'm so happy Evelyn has been found," she said. "I only hope she doesn't hate me for receiving the love she should have had." Milo made a gagging sound. "She talks like a sad violin fell into soup." I laughed before I could stop myself. Then Adrian appeared behind them and placed one hand on Sabrina's shoulder, the perfect eldest son supporting the fragile daughter. He looked into the camera and said, "We will give Evelyn time. Family cannot be forced." He was right, though not in the way he intended. A week later, Cole came to my school. He waited near the parking lot with two boys whose faces were different from the ones in my previous life, but whose cowardice was identical. I continued walking until he stepped into my path. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he demanded. "Making Mom cry, making Sabrina feel guilty, acting like you're better than us." Milo had insisted on walking from the nearby middle school building to meet me. He moved in front of me with a juice box in one hand. "Sir, this is a parking lot, not your villain audition." Cole looked down at him. "You little—" I raised my phone. The red recording light was clearly visible. Cole's expression changed, but it was too late. Two security officers were already approaching from the school gate. My attorney had notified the administration. Dad had submitted written instructions, and Mom had spoken directly with the principal. There would be no blind corners this time. No locked restrooms, no fountains, no dead animals hidden in places where adults could pretend not to notice. Cole tried to laugh. "You're recording your own brother? You are not my brother." His face darkened. He grabbed my wrist. The security officers forced him to the ground within seconds. Milo stared at the scene with disappointment. I wanted to throw my juice at him. "No. It's grape. It would have looked dramatic." "Milo. Fine, I'll save it for court." The video spread online before dinner, but I was not the one who posted it. One of Cole's own friends uploaded it because he believed it made Cole look protective. Instead, it showed exactly what Cole was: aggressive, uncontrolled, and dangerous. The Whitmore parents released statements excusing his behavior. Sabrina posted a gentle request asking the public not to attack her family. Adrian called me that night. His voice was as controlled as ever. "You are escalating this unnecessarily." I sat beside my bedroom window with his folder open on the desk. Cole escalated. I documented. "Public conflict helps no one." It helped me. Silence followed. Then his tone became almost warm. "You're smart. Smarter than I expected. But burning bridges too early can leave you isolated." There it was, not concern, strategy. "I was isolated in my first life," I said softly. "It taught me how to swim." He did not answer. After that call, I followed the financial records more aggressively. The Whitmore Family Trust had been created years earlier. Biological children held inheritance rights connected to voting shares in the company. Sabrina's legal position had been strengthened through a private family arrangement, but it was not as secure as the public assumed. Adrian's succession remained safe only if the missing biological daughter stayed absent, dependent, or manageable. If I returned with proof of my identity, independent assets, business knowledge, and no emotional dependence on the family, I became a threat, not to their hearts, to their control. Sabrina was useful because she needed their approval. Cole was useful because his anger could be directed. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore were useful because guilt and favoritism made them easy to manipulate. I was not useful. That was why Adrian had needed me powerless in my previous life, and eventually why he had needed me dead. I had spent years believing the final kidnapping was Sabrina's ultimate act of jealousy. Now I understood the structure. Sabrina lit matches. Adrian owned the warehouse. I set my trap slowly. When the Whitmores invited me to a private family dinner, I accepted. There would be no reporters, and no formal announcement. Adrian sounded pleased when he learned I was coming. Sabrina sent me a long message about healing our relationship. Cole sent nothing because his phone had been confiscated after the school incident. Mom worried all day. Dad inspected the car twice. Milo appeared in my doorway wearing a backpack. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Coming with you." "No. I am your only annoying brother. They don't get to apply for the position." His stubborn expression almost made me soften. Instead, I shook my head. "That is exactly why you are staying here. You never let me do revenge activities." "Correct. This household is oppressive." Mom caught the back of his shirt and pulled him away while he continued protesting. I went to the Whitmore estate with two security professionals hired through my attorney. A small recorder was concealed beneath my blouse, and copies of every important document were stored in 3 separate locations. The mansion smelled of lilies and money. Mrs. Whitmore cried when she saw me. Mr. Whitmore looked both proud and wounded, as though my calmness were a personal insult. Sabrina wore white, which was entirely predictable. Cole was absent. Adrian was waiting in the dining room. Dinner was polite enough to feel poisonous. Mrs. Whitmore tried to serve me fish, then hesitated because she did not know what I liked. My mother knew I hated river fish. She knew too much ice cream made me sick. She knew I slept with my window slightly open unless it was raining. Mrs. Whitmore knew my blood type. That was the difference between giving birth to a child and raising one. After dinner, Sabrina asked me to speak with her near the garden room. The moment we were alone, she lowered her voice. "I know you hate me. I don't think about you often enough to hate you." Her expression tightened, but the tears arrived on schedule. "I only wanted a family. Is that so wrong?" "No." Relief flickered across her face before I continued. "What was wrong was trying to destroy another girl because you were afraid love had a limit." Her tears stopped. "You think you're so noble because your little professor parents loved you." My chest went cold. There she was beneath the lace and trembling lips. "You mean my parents? They are not your real parents." I smiled. Then why are you so angry that they loved me better than yours loved you? Her hand rose toward my face. I caught her wrist before she could slap me. The door opened. Adrian stood there. Sabrina. She instantly collapsed into sobs. Adrian? I tried. She hates me. He looked at my hand. Let her go, Evelyn. I released Sabrina's wrist. She ran past him, but he did not immediately follow. Instead, he partly closed the door behind her. You enjoy provoking her, he said. You enjoy cleaning up after her. His smile was faint. She is fragile. No, she is useful. He became completely still. I stepped closer. Cole is loud. Sabrina is emotional. You are the only one who never appears dirty. Adrian studied me for several seconds. Then the polite smile returned. You are imagining enemies because you were hurt. No, I am recognizing management. For the first time, his eyes changed. The reaction lasted less than a second, but I saw it. You are impressive, Evelyn, he said. It is unfortunate that you insist on being difficult. I tilted my head. There you are. His smile disappeared for one breath. Then he opened the door. Good night. 2 days later, Sabrina tried to frame me online. She posted edited messages from the dinner, a photograph of the bruise on her wrist from when I stopped her slap, and a caption claiming she was terrified of losing her family. Her fans attacked first. Entertainment blogs followed. Then came reporters friendly with the Whitmores. The headlines described Sabrina as frightened and me as cold, violent, and ungrateful. I waited 6 hours. Then I released one unedited video. It showed Sabrina raising her hand first. It showed me catching her wrist. It captured her, saying my parents were not real, and my response about being loved better. It showed the look on her face before Adrian entered. There was no dramatic soundtrack and no commentary. Only the complete sequence. Public opinion did not change universally. It never does, but it shifted enough. Then my investigation found the man who had kidnapped me before the entrance examination in my previous life. In this life, I located him before he had the opportunity to target me. He was older now and employed as security at a private club owned through one of Adrian's shell companies. My attorney's investigator traced a payment from a Whitmore subsidiary into his account. A second payment led to one of Cole's friends. A third connected to a vehicle rental company associated with the route used in my previous life. When the police questioned him, he agreed to cooperate. Cowards often become honest when the first door closes behind them. He did not need to know anything about rebirth. He admitted he had previously been offered money to frighten me before an important examination if Sabrina ever required an advantage. He confirmed Sabrina knew about the arrangement and that Cole had helped provide access to the school. Under further questioning, he admitted the money had come from a company controlled by Adrian Whitmore. Sabrina cried when investigators approached her. Cole exploded. Adrian said almost nothing. His silence did not save him. Cole was the first to be arrested, though not for crimes from a life that no longer legally existed. He ignored the protective order and came to our house one night while intoxicated. He stood outside the gate screaming that I had destroyed Sabrina's life. After the confrontation at school, Dad had installed cameras around the property. Milo watched from an upstairs window and called down, "Smile for the criminal record." Cole threw a stone at the glass. The police arrived 4 minutes later. He resisted arrest because self-control had never been one of his talents. By morning, the footage of him shouting at our gate was everywhere. "You're not my sister!" he roared, while officers forced him into the vehicle. I stood behind the locked gate in my coat. Finally, we agree on something. That line appeared on the evening news. Within a week, the trust administrators restricted Cole's access to family funds because he had become a legal liability. His school suspended him. Friends who had once encouraged his behavior stopped answering when criminal charges became real. Sabrina remained silent. Adrian visited Cole once in detention, and the meeting only deepened the fracture between them. Afterward, Cole screamed at Mr. Whitmore. Adrian said I was always too loud to be useful. That sentence traveled through the family faster than any newspaper article. For the first time, Cole understood that he had never been Sabrina's hero or Adrian's valued brother. He had been a weapon, useful only until he became impossible to control. The hostage crisis came 3 weeks later. By then, Adrian was cornered, but he was not defeated. That made him more dangerous. The call arrived during breakfast. Mom was cutting fruit. Dad was reading. Milo had created a hand-drawn chart explaining why ice cream before noon should be permitted under exceptional emotional circumstances. My phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice had been electronically distorted. 2 locations, 2 women, choose. A video appeared on my screen. Mom was tied to a chair inside an empty school building. A second video showed Mrs. Whitmore bound in an abandoned warehouse. My blood turned to ice. Milo's fork struck the table. Dad stood so quickly that his chair fell backward. The distorted voice continued. "One is the woman who raised you, the other is the woman who gave birth to you. You can reach only one in time." I stared at the screen. Adrian had finally stopped smiling. He wanted to create a story in which every choice condemned me. If I saved my adoptive mother, the public could call me heartless toward the woman who gave birth to me. If I saved Mrs. Whitmore, he could claim that blood had ultimately defeated loyalty. If either woman died, He could turn my grief and guilt into a weapon. Then my hands stopped shaking. That was when I knew I could beat him, because he still believed love made me predictable. It did. It simply did not make me foolish. I looked at Dad. Call the second team. His face was pale, but he nodded immediately. We had planned for the possibility that Adrian might escalate, not for this exact nightmare, but for a coordinated attack. We had legal counsel, police contacts, private security routes, tracking procedures, and a list of suspicious properties connected to Whitmore shell companies. Milo grabbed my sleeve. Evelyn, stay with Dad. No. His voice cracked. Please. I crouched and held his face between my hands. You are my brother. Protecting this house is your job now. I hate that job. I know. Come back. I will. I went to Mom first. There was no hesitation. The drive felt endless. My security team moved ahead while police vehicles followed without sirens until the final turn. The abandoned school building had been closed for renovation. Adrian had chosen it because Mom had taught there years earlier. It was cruel, symbolic, and carefully planned. I hated him even more for that. When officers and I entered, Mom lifted her head. Relief and terror filled her eyes. Evelyn, leave. Please, leave. No. A masked man stepped from behind a damaged desk holding a knife. He barely raised his arm before the officers subdued him. Another man tried to escape through a rear stairwell and was caught. A third reached for a phone before an officer restrained him. Adrian had hired men who were skilled at frightening unprotected people, not at confronting a prepared police team. I ran to Mom and began working at the knots around her wrists. My fingers shook so badly that I struggled with them. You should have gone to her, Mom whispered. I stopped. Even while tied to a chair, she was thinking about someone else. I pressed my forehead against her hands. You stayed when I had nothing. Let me stay now. She began to cry. Mom never cried loudly, but her fingers clung to mine so tightly that I felt 4 years old again. The second team reached Mrs. Whitmore 7 minutes later. She was terrified but alive. Adrian had installed cameras near both locations because he wanted footage of my choice. Instead, the police recovered the cameras, the captors' phones, payment records, and a frightened driver who gave Adrian's name before the handcuffs were fully secured. By evening, the Whitmores were already trying to control the story. Mr. Whitmore announced a press conference at company headquarters. He intended to speak about family tragedy, unity, and healing. It was almost elegant. Adrian had taught them well. I arrived with Mom, Dad, Milo, my attorney, and evidence that had already been submitted to investigators. The headquarters lobby was crowded with reporters and board members. Sabrina sat near Mrs. Whitmore, her face swollen from crying. Cole was absent because bail had been denied. Adrian stood beside Mr. Whitmore, calm as always. Then he saw me. For the first time, he did not smile. Mrs. Whitmore stood immediately. Evelyn. I walked toward the front. Mr. Whitmore attempted to stop me. This is not the time. No, I said. This is the first honest moment this family has ever had. Cameras turned toward me. Reporters leaned forward. Adrian's eyes became cold. I placed 2 photographs on the table. The first had been taken on the night my adoptive parents found me. It showed a tiny infant with blue skin, wrapped in a dirty towel and held tightly against Mom's chest inside an emergency clinic. The second showed my first day of school. Mom held my hand while Dad crouched beside us, both of them smiling as though someone had given them the world. My voice remained steady. You gave me blood. They gave me a name. The room became silent. Mrs. Whitmore covered her mouth. I placed the next folder on the table. Sabrina Whitmore sabotaged my examination, participated in harassment, manipulated evidence, and tried to portray me as unstable. Cole Whitmore carried out violence in her name. Their parents ignored every warning because they preferred a daughter who cried prettily to a daughter who told them the truth. Sabrina began sobbing. She hates me. Evelyn has always hated me. I turned toward her. I do not want your family, Sabrina. I already survived them once. She froze. Adrian stepped forward. Enough. Trauma does not give you the right to invent crimes. I faced him. You're right. That is why I brought proof. The first screen behind me lit up. Payment records, shell companies, security contracts, the statement from the man connected to the examination abduction, money paid for access to the school, vehicle rentals, leases for the hostage locations, communications involving the drivers and hired men, recovered files that had been deleted from systems connected to Adrian's private office. I also showed the route near the cliff from my previous life, though I presented it only through evidence that existed in this one. That morning, investigators had intercepted a transport plan using an almost identical route, and linked it to one of Adrian's companies. The pattern was no longer a memory known only to me. It had become something the authorities could examine. Adrian's expression remained controlled until the driver's recorded statement played. Mr. Whitmore paid me to frighten her, the man said. Mr. Adrian Whitmore. He told me that if anything went wrong, Sabrina and Cole would attract all the attention. The room erupted. Adrian finally moved. This material has been fabricated. My attorney placed another document beside the folder. Then you can explain why the payment account was accessed from your private office 5 minutes before the transfer. Next came Cole's recorded statement. Adrian said I was always too loud to be useful. The sentence alone would not have proved a crime. Combined with the payments, shell companies, witnesses, deleted files, property records, and statements from the hostage takers, it became another blade cutting through Adrian's perfect image. I looked at him. You smiled because you believed clean hands meant innocence. I learned too late that the cleanest hands often pay for the dirtiest work. His expression finally cracked. Only slightly, but everyone saw it. You were never the good brother, I said. You were simply the quiet one. That was what broke the family's remaining illusion. Sabrina stood so abruptly that her chair overturned. Adrian, you told me you were helping me. He did not look at her. She reached toward him. You said Evelyn would take everything. You said they would throw me away if she returned. You promised you would protect me. Adrian finally turned. His face was empty. You were useful when you were loved. Mrs. Whitmore made a sound that was half sob and half gasp. Sabrina stepped backward as though he had struck her. There was no caring brother in front of her, no protector. There was only a man who had used her fear the way he had used Cole's rage. Mr. Whitmore stared at his eldest son. You did all of this? Adrian adjusted one cuff. Even then, even with the room collapsing around him, he tried to remain composed. Everything I did protected the company from chaos. That sentence ended him. The legal consequences came later, but in that moment, he ceased to be the perfect son, the responsible heir, and the reasonable man who always knew what was best. Police entered before he reached the side exit. Adrian Whitmore was arrested in front of reporters, board members, his parents, and the sister he had manipulated and discarded. Sabrina screamed until her voice broke. Cole screamed from detention when he learned what had happened. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore said nothing as Adrian was led away. He looked at me once. For the first time, his hatred appeared without politeness covering it. I smiled. After that, the structure Adrian had built collapsed quickly. Whitmore Industries lost investor confidence. The board removed him from the succession plan and froze his access to company systems and voting authority. The family trust entered formal review. Cole's access to inheritance funds remained suspended because of the criminal charges and protective orders against him. Sabrina's agency dropped her within a week. Sponsors canceled contracts. Former classmates began sharing stories about her behavior. Previous employees described tantrums, manipulation, and the way she encouraged Cole's violence while pretending to stop it. Her image as a fragile, gracious daughter deteriorated under the weight of consistent testimony. She made one final video. She wore a white sweater, no visible makeup, and tears ran down her face. I only wanted to keep my family. The comments did not rescue her. People reminded her that she had helped destroy the biological daughter she claimed to welcome. They pointed out that she cried while Cole hurt others for her. They said Adrian had used her because she willingly allowed other people to suffer as long as she remained protected. For the first time, Sabrina disabled the comment section. Mrs. Whitmore came to our house 2 weeks later. There were no cameras, assistants, or expensive black cars. Sabrina was not with her. She stood outside the gate in a plain coat and looked smaller than I remembered. Mom was inside making tea. Milo pretended not to spy through the curtains. I walked outside alone. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes filled as soon as she saw me. Evelyn, I waited. I was wrong. Yes. I should have protected you. Yes. She swallowed. I am your real mother. There it was, the final card blood always tried to play. I looked through the gate toward the woman who had given birth to me, then at the home where I had been raised. In my previous life, she had spent years teaching me that blood entitled her to my loyalty while requiring nothing from her in return. No, I said. You are the woman who gave birth to me. My real mother is the woman I chose to save first. Her lips trembled. I almost died, and you saved her first. Yes. The answer was not cruel. It was honest, and that hurt her more. Mr. Whitmore came on another day carrying a thick folder. It contained inheritance documents, company shares, a public apology, and an offer to formally recognize my position within the family. I did not touch it. Is this love or damage control? He flinched. Both. Perhaps. At least you are learning honesty. I don't want to lose you again. You never had me. His face went gray. Dad walked outside. He was not angry or loud. He simply stood beside me with the steadiness he had given me throughout my life. You found her when she became useful, Dad said. We found her when she had no name and no warmth. Mr. Whitmore looked at him for a long time before lowering his head. A child is not claimed by blood, Dad continued. A child is claimed by the people who stay. Mr. Whitmore left the folder on the bench. I used none of its contents for personal luxury. After legal review, part of the available money funded a foundation for abandoned children. Another portion created long-term security for Mom, Dad, and Milo. The remaining Whitmore assets stayed tied up in court while attorneys and investigators examined the damage Adrian had concealed. I did not need their surname to become powerful. I had already built something of my own. Over the following months, the criminal cases moved through the proper process. Adrian faced charges connected to conspiracy, kidnapping, fraud, evidence tampering, and financing violence. His reputation as the flawless eldest son became a public example of how calm behavior and polished language can hide corruption. Cole faced charges involving assault, stalking, threats, and violation of the protective order. He continued blaming me during early interviews until his attorney stopped allowing him to speak publicly. The school incident, the night at our gate, and his connection to Sabrina's previous harassment destroyed the last remnants of his image as a misunderstood protective brother. Sabrina was investigated for harassment, examination, sabotage, false accusations, and involvement in the earlier payments. She initially avoided the most severe charges because Adrian had kept the dirtiest financial trail under his own name. Still, she lost the thing she had valued most, her audience. There were no more invitations, endorsements, staged family photographs, or sympathetic interviews. Cole was no longer standing beside her. Adrian was no longer behind her. The Whitmore parents could no longer smile blindly while she cried. Without their protection, she was simply a frightened woman forced to confront how many people had suffered to preserve her innocence. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Then I remembered the cliff. I remembered the wind and the hands that had let me fall. I remembered years of being told that shared blood should compensate for cruelty. Regret was not the same as innocence. By winter, the consequences were no longer rumors. Adrian accepted a plea agreement after the shell company records and witness statements left him no clean path forward. He lost his position as successor, his board seat, his voting authority, and control over the trust he had committed crimes to protect. Whitmore Industries spent months explaining to investors how its perfect heir had become its greatest liability. Cole's case concluded more quickly. The restraining order violation, the school assault, the threats at our home, and the evidence connecting him to Sabrina's harassment were more than enough. His trust access remained frozen, his academic record was damaged beyond repair, and the family attorneys stopped describing him as misunderstood. Sabrina avoided prison for the most serious parts of the scheme because Adrian had deliberately kept the strongest financial evidence under his own control. She did not escape without consequences. Her agency ended its relationship with her permanently. Every major brand contract disappeared. The investigations into her false allegations and examination sabotage followed her everywhere. The girl who had once cried beautifully enough to receive instant protection was forced to watch the public learn how many people had been harmed on her behalf. The Whitmore parents called the entire collapse a tragedy. The rest of the world called it evidence. That winter, Mom prepared hot pot for dinner. Dad bought ice cream. Milo created a formal seating chart that placed me in the most important sister seat, himself on the only legitimate brother throne, and the ice cream under shared custody. Mom examined the carton. Evelyn, only half a bowl, too much will make you sick. For a second, I was 4 years old again, waiting for ice cream in a life where my parents never came home. Then the moment passed. I was at our table. Steam rose from the hot pot. Dad argued with Milo about table manners. Mom pretended not to notice when I stole an extra spoonful of ice cream. Milo pointed at me. Criminal. You helped me. I was undercover. Mom sighed. Both of you are impossible. Dad smiled over the top of his glasses, and I laughed. There was no bitterness in that laughter. No strategy, calculation, or desperate need to be accepted. After everything that had happened, the ability to laugh with them felt like a kind of revenge too. Later that night, I stepped onto the porch and watched snow fall softly across the yard. Mom came outside and wrapped a scarf around my shoulders. You'll catch a cold, she said. I know. She stood beside me in silence for a while, then reached for my hand. You saved me. I looked at her. You saved me first. Her eyes shone. From inside the house, Milo shouted that Dad was stealing meat from the pot and committing hot pot corruption. Mom laughed through her tears. The Whitmores searched for their daughter when they needed an heir, a sympathetic story, and a way to repair their damaged image. My parents found me when I was a freezing infant with nothing to offer them. So when the world asked which family I chose, I never hesitated. I chose the people who had chosen me first.